Did you know that one of Hollywood's most powerful movies almost had a completely different ending? One that the original playwright refused to approve? Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is a story about lies, love, and the weight of secrets. It feels like a thunderstorm trapped inside a beautiful house. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Number 20. The play that almost stayed on stage. Before Cat on a Hot Tin Roof ever touched a movie screen, it lived on a Broadway stage. Tennessee Williams wrote it as a play, and it won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 1955. That is one of the highest honors a writer can receive in America. The play was raw, honest, and deeply uncomfortable. It talked about things that most people in the 1950s did not want to say out loud: broken marriages, alcoholism, and the crushing pressure of family expectations. When Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer decided to turn it into a film, everyone in Hollywood knew the job would not be easy. The story was too bold, too fierce, too real. Studio executives were nervous, writers were cautious, directors were careful. But the material was so powerful that people could not ignore it. Tennessee Williams had written something that felt like it was ripped straight from real life. The kind of story that makes your chest tight and your hands cold. The play had already made audiences cry and gasp and sit in uncomfortable silence in theaters across America. Now it was going to face the bright lights of Hollywood and the even brighter scrutiny of censors who watched every word, every scene, every breath of emotion. Turning this play into a movie was not just a creative challenge. It was almost like trying to put a wild animal into a golden cage. Something beautiful, something dangerous, and something that might not survive the journey. What looked explosive on stage almost got suffocated on screen. Number 19. Tennessee Williams did not like the changes. Tennessee Williams was not a quiet man when it came to his own work. He cared deeply about every word, every silence, every moment of pain in his stories. So when Hollywood began changing his script to satisfy the censors of the time, Williams was not happy. The production code, also called the Hays Code, was a strict set of rules that controlled what movies could and could not show. One of the most important topics in the original play was the suggestion that Brick, the main male character, might be struggling with his feelings about his late best friend Skipper. This topic was completely removed from the movie. Williams felt that removing it was like cutting out the heart of the story. Without that detail, Brick's drinking and his emotional distance from his wife Maggie lost much of their deeper meaning. The character became harder to understand. The story lost some of its sharpest edges. Williams later spoke about his disappointment. He said that the film was still good, still powerful, but it was not the full truth he had written. And for a man who believed in the truth above almost everything else, that felt like a loss. Yet even with those changes, the movie still crackled with electricity. The performances were so alive and so honest that audiences felt the emotion even when they did not know exactly why. The story still hurt. It still burned. It still felt like something true. What was cut from the page still lived in the eyes of the actors. Number 18. Paul Newman. Almost did not get the role. Paul Newman was already becoming a star in the 1950s, but the role of Brick Pollitt was not handed to him easily. The studio considered other names. There were conversations about other actors who might bring a different kind of energy to the character. But director Richard Brooks believed strongly in Paul Newman. He had seen what Newman could do. He knew that Newman had the right combination of beauty and brokenness that Brick needed. Brick was a man who had once been a star athlete, full of life and energy, but who was now hollow, drinking whiskey and limping around on a broken ankle, refusing to talk about what was really hurting him inside. That kind of role required an actor who could say everything with his eyes and his silence. Newman could do that. He could stand in a room and say nothing and still fill the screen with emotion. but Newman himself felt the pressure. He later said that he was not completely satisfied with his performance. He felt that because the script had removed the most important hidden layer of Brick's story, he was left playing a man whose deepest wound had been erased. He was acting around a hole in the character. That is an incredibly difficult thing for any actor to do. And yet audiences and critics both loved what he delivered. He played a man full of secrets, even when the script hid them away. Number 17. Elizabeth Taylor fought for her role. Elizabeth Taylor was already one of the most famous women in the world when she was cast as Maggie the cat. But fame did not protect her from doubt. Some people at the studio were not sure she could handle such an emotionally demanding role. Maggie is not a soft character. She is fierce, desperate, smart, and sometimes cruel. She loves her husband so deeply that it hurts. And her husband barely looks at her. Elizabeth Taylor had always been known for her beauty, but this role demanded something more. It demanded hunger, vulnerability, fire. Taylor threw herself into the part completely. She studied Tennessee Williams' language. She understood Maggie's longing, that desperate feeling of reaching for someone who keeps pulling away. Taylor herself was going through painful moments in her personal life during that time, and some of that real emotion found its way into her performance. There is a scene where Maggie talks so fast and so passionately that you can almost feel the words trying to fill all the silence in the room. That was Taylor, using her real feelings to bring Maggie to life. The studio watched the early footage and understood immediately. They had made the right choice. Elizabeth Taylor was not just beautiful on screen, she was alive on screen, and Maggie the cat needed someone who was truly, completely alive. She did not just play Maggie, she became her. Number 16. Burl Ives reprised. His Broadway role. One of the most wonderful things about the movie is that Burl Ives, the actor who played Big Daddy, had already played the same role on Broadway. When they made the film, they brought him back. That was a smart and courageous decision. Burl Ives was known mostly as a folk singer before his stage work brought him serious acting recognition. His deep voice, his enormous physical presence, and his natural warmth made Big Daddy one of the most unforgettable characters in the film. Big Daddy is a man who built everything from nothing. He owns a huge Mississippi plantation. He is dying of cancer, though he does not fully understand it yet. He is rough and honest and sometimes cruel, but underneath all of that is a man who just wants the truth. He wants his son Brick to talk to him, really talk to him, before it is too late. Burl Ives understood all of that. He had lived inside that character for weeks on a real Broadway stage, feeling the audience breathe and react in real time. When he stepped in front of the movie camera, he brought all of that experience with him. His performance earned him a Golden Globe Award, and many critics felt he deserved an Academy Award nomination as well. His scenes with Paul Newman are electric, two men circling the truth like they are afraid to touch it. He had played this man before, and he knew exactly where it hurt. Number 15. The movie was shot almost entirely indoors. One of the most surprising technical facts about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is how small the world of the movie actually is. Almost the entire film takes place inside the plantation house, specifically in Brick and Maggie's bedroom, the hallways, and the large birthday party area. The set designers at MGM worked hard to create a space that felt both luxurious and suffocating. The bedroom especially was designed to look beautiful but feel like a trap. Every item in the room told a story. The wide bed that Brick refuses to share with Maggie. The liquor cabinet that he visits again and again. The crutch that he leans on after breaking his ankle during a drunken late-night attempt to relive his glory days on a track field. Director Richard Brooks made a conscious choice to keep the camera close to the actors. He did not want to open up the world with big outdoor landscape shots. He wanted the audience to feel the heat, the pressure, the walls closing in. That choice turned out to be brilliant because it forced the audience to watch faces, to read expressions, to notice the tiny moments of pain and longing and anger that passed between characters like sparks. The confined space made everything feel more intense. There was nowhere to run, no fresh air, just the truth sitting in the room with everyone. The small space made the emotions feel enormous. Number 14. The script went through. Many rewrites. Getting the script right for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was not a simple process. Director Richard Brooks and producer Lawrence Weingarten worked hard to adapt Tennessee Williams's play for the screen while also satisfying the strict rules of the production code. Several different drafts were written. Some were too faithful to the original and got rejected by censors. Others changed too much and lost the spirit of Williams's vision. Finding the balance was like walking a tightrope over a river. The writers had to keep the emotional core of the story, the lies, the longing, the approaching death of Big Daddy, while removing or softening the elements that censors found unacceptable. The ending was also changed significantly. In Williams's original play, the ending is more ambiguous, more open, more unsettling. The movie version ties things together in a slightly more hopeful way, suggesting that Brick and Maggie might actually find their way back to each other. Williams was not thrilled with this change either. He believed that life was not always neatly resolved, but studios in the 1950s wanted audiences to leave the theater feeling some kind of hope. The rewriting process was long and difficult, and it required enormous patience from everyone involved. But when it was finished, the script was still, despite all the compromises, a deeply human and emotionally honest story. Every draft got them closer to the truth they were allowed to tell. Number 13. Richard Brooks was a fearless director. Not every director would have been brave enough to take on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof in the 1950s. It was the kind of project that could make a career or break it. Richard Brooks was known for his courage and his willingness to tackle difficult adult stories. He had already directed powerful films before this one, and he understood how to handle complex emotional material without letting it become melodrama. His approach on set was disciplined and focused. He wanted real performances, not theatrical ones. He pushed his actors to find the truth in quiet moments, not just in big emotional outbursts. He believed that what a character did not say was often more important than what they did say. That philosophy matched Tennessee Williams's writing perfectly, because Williams's plays are full of silences that scream. Brooks also made smart visual choices throughout the film. He lit scenes in a way that made people look both beautiful and tired, both glamorous and trapped. His camera work felt intimate without being intrusive. He gave actors space to breathe and think, which is what great actors need. Richard Brooks received an Academy Award nomination for Best Director for this film. It was a well-deserved recognition for a man who had taken a risk and made something genuinely unforgettable. He did not direct a movie. He directed the truth. Number 12. The film was a massive box office success. Despite all the controversy and all the compromises with censors, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was a huge hit with audiences when it was released in 1958. It became one of the highest-grossing films of that year. Audiences lined up around the block. People who had never read Tennessee Williams or seen a Broadway play were suddenly talking about Brick and Maggie and Big Daddy. The film touched something deep and universal in people, the fear of dying without saying what you really feel, the pain of loving someone who has shut you out, the weight of pretending that everything is fine when everything is falling apart. These were feelings that people in the 1950s felt very deeply, even if they rarely talked about them. The movie gave them a safe space to experience those feelings, to cry in a dark theater, to feel the ache, and then walk back out into the sunshine. MGM was delighted. The studio had taken a risk on challenging material and had been rewarded with both critical praise and enormous commercial success. The film earned 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Paul Newman, Best Actress for Elizabeth Taylor, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It did not win any, but the nominations alone were a powerful statement. The story was too true for people to stay away. Number 11. Elizabeth Taylor's Personal Tragedy. During filming. One of the most heartbreaking stories surrounding this film is what Elizabeth Taylor was going through in her personal life while making it. In March of 1958, just as the film was being completed and prepared for release, her husband, the producer Mike Todd, died in a plane crash. It was a devastating loss. Elizabeth Taylor was shattered. The grief was overwhelming. And yet the film she had made was about to be released to the world, and she had to face that, along with the cameras and the publicity and the questions. Looking back at her performance in the film, knowing what she experienced just after finishing it, makes everything she did on screen feel even more emotional. There are moments in the movie where Maggie talks about love and loss and not being wanted, and those words feel like they carry a weight that goes beyond acting. Taylor later spoke about how much she had put of herself into Maggie and how making the film had been both exhausting and freeing. Some artists find that pouring themselves into their work helps them survive difficult times. For Elizabeth Taylor in 1958, this film was both her greatest professional achievement and a deeply personal piece of her own story. She gave the role everything, and then life gave her even more pain to carry. Number 10. The hidden language of the film. Tennessee Williams was a poet as much as he was a playwright. His dialogue in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is full of hidden meanings, symbols, and layers of emotion that work on different levels at the same time. When Maggie talks about being a cat on a hot tin roof, she is describing herself, a creature that has to keep moving, keep balancing, keep surviving, even when the surface beneath her is burning. That image is simple enough for a child to picture, but it carries the weight of a whole life. The bedroom in the film is full of symbolic details that the director and set designers placed very deliberately. The large portrait of an athlete on the wall represents Brick's past glory and his current failure. The untouched bed represents the broken connection between husband and wife. The constant sound of celebrations happening elsewhere in the house represents the world moving forward while Brick stays stuck. Director Richard Brooks and his team were very aware of all these layers. They worked to make sure that the visual storytelling matched the richness of Williams's language. This is why the film rewards repeat viewings. Every time you watch it, you notice something new. A look, an object, a silence that says more than words ever could. The story was spoken in pictures as much as in words. Number 9. Paul Newman's research for Brick. Paul Newman was never an actor who simply showed up and read his lines. He was deeply committed to understanding the people he played. For the role of Brick Pollitt, he spent time researching the psychology of the character. Why a man would drink himself numb. Why a man would shut out everyone who loved him. Why a man would be so angry at the world that he could not even look at his own wife. Newman consulted with people who understood psychology. He thought carefully about the physicality of the character, how a man on a broken ankle moves differently, how pain changes the way you stand, the way you hold your shoulders, the way you look at the world. He practiced moving with a crutch until it felt completely natural. He also thought about the silence, about all the things Brick refuses to say. In many ways, the most important part of Newman's preparation was learning how not to speak, how to hold emotion in his face and his body without letting it escape through words. It is a rare skill, and Newman had developed it carefully over his years of study and performance. The result is a performance that feels completely alive, even when Brick is doing almost nothing. You watch Newman sit and drink and stare, and you feel everything he is hiding. He learned to say more by saying nothing at all. Number 8. The censors changed the ending. The ending of Tennessee Williams's original play is one of its most talked about moments. In the play, Maggie announces to Brick that she is pregnant, even though she is not. She tells this lie to give Big Daddy hope and to force Brick into a moment of genuine connection with her. The play then ends with Maggie essentially trapping Brick in a situation where they must finally face each other honestly. It is ambiguous, it is uncomfortable, it is very Tennessee Williams. But the movie needed a different kind of ending, one that gave audiences a sense of resolution and hope. The censors and the studio both pushed for a version where Brick and Maggie actually reconnect, where there is a genuine moment of reconciliation between them. In the film, there is a scene toward the end where Brick seems to finally open up, to finally let down his walls just a little. It is more hopeful than what Williams had written. Williams himself said this change bothered him. He felt that the movie was giving the audience an easy exit from a story that was supposed to make them sit with something difficult. But even with this change, the ending of the film is still emotionally powerful. Elizabeth Taylor's final scene is magnetic, full of love and desperation and just a tiny sliver of hope. They softened the ending, but the pain still echoed through it. Number 7. The supporting cast was extraordinary. While Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor are the stars that everyone remembers from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, the supporting cast was equally impressive and equally important to the film's success. Judith Anderson played Big Mama, the mother of Brick and Gooper, the wife of Big Daddy, with tremendous heart. Her performance is full of love and worry and a kind of desperate cheerfulness that is both touching and sad. She is a woman who knows something is very wrong with her family and her husband, and she keeps smiling because she does not know what else to do. Jack Carson played Gooper, Brick's older brother, a man who has always done everything right and has never been loved as much as his wilder, more charismatic younger brother. The resentment that Carson brings to that role is subtle and real and very human. Madeline Sherwood played May, Gooper's wife, a woman who is scheming and sharp-tongued, but who is also, underneath it all, just a person fighting for her family's survival. Every single one of these performances added texture and reality to the world of the film. They made the Pollitt family feel like a real family, messy and complicated and full of unspoken things. The stars shone bright, but the whole sky made the night beautiful. Number 6. The cinematography told its own story. The man behind the camera on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was William H. Daniels, one of the most respected cinematographers in Hollywood history. Daniels had shot some of the most beautiful and dramatic films of the studio era, and he brought all of his skill and experience to this project. He understood that the story needed a very specific visual feeling, hot, close, golden, and suffocating. He used warm lighting to make the Mississippi plantation house look lush and wealthy, but he also used shadow and tight framing to make it feel like a trap. Close-up shots were used frequently throughout the film because the story lives in faces. When Big Daddy is telling a story about his life, the camera watches his eyes. When Maggie is reaching out to Brick and being ignored, the camera catches the exact moment her hope falters. Daniels had a gift for finding the right distance between the camera and the actor, close enough to feel intimate, far enough to let the performance breathe. His work on this film is a masterclass in emotional cinematography. Every shot was a choice. Every shadow was a decision. The camera was not just recording the story, it was feeling it right alongside the characters. He did not just film the story, he felt it through the lens. Number 5. The film sparked. Important conversations. When Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was released in 1958, it did something rare and important. It made ordinary people, not just critics or academics, talk about things they usually kept silent. It made people talk about the difference between the life they were living and the life they really wanted. It made people talk about marriage, about honesty, about what happens when you love someone who has gone somewhere inside themselves that you cannot follow. In the conservative culture of the 1950s, these were not easy conversations to have, but the movie gave people a starting point. It gave them words, Tennessee Williams' beautiful, burning, aching words, that they could use to describe their own feelings. In living rooms and diners and movie theaters across America, people whispered about Brick and Maggie. They argued about who was right and who was wrong. They wondered what their own families were hiding behind bright smiles and good manners. The film reminded people that silence is not peace, that pretending is not happiness, that the truth, even when it hurts, is always better than the beautiful lie. For a story about one Mississippi family on one summer night, that is an enormous achievement. One family's secrets helped a whole nation begin to speak. Number 4. The film's legacy in cinema history. Decades after its release, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is still considered one of the greatest American films ever made. It appears on countless lists of classic cinema. Film schools study it. Actors use scenes from it as audition pieces. Tennessee Williams's language has been quoted in essays and articles and conversations around the world. The film represents a specific and precious moment in Hollywood history, a time when studios were beginning to push against the boundaries of what was acceptable, when actors were bringing new levels of emotional honesty to the screen, and when great playwrights were being translated into cinematic art. Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor's performances in this film helped define what screen acting could be. They showed that vulnerability was not weakness, that a character who fell apart on screen could be more powerful than one who stayed composed. Richard Brooks's direction showed that a film did not need action sequences or spectacular special effects to keep an audience completely riveted. All it needed was truth. All it needed was two people in a room who could not quite say what they meant. And somehow, that was more thrilling than anything else. It did not need spectacle. It just needed truth. And truth was enough. Number 3. Elizabeth Taylor's nomination and the controversy. Elizabeth Taylor received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress for her performance in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. This was a deeply deserved recognition. Taylor's work in the film showed the world that she was not just a beautiful face. She was a serious, committed, emotionally powerful actress. However, the Oscar that year went to Susan Hayward for her role in I Want to Live. Many film critics and historians have argued over the years that Taylor's performance in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was one of the finest pieces of acting in that entire decade. The nomination and loss began a very public conversation about how Hollywood judged female performances, whether beauty worked against actresses in serious dramatic categories, whether certain kinds of emotional work were undervalued. For Taylor herself, the nomination was both a victory and a frustration. She had fought for this role. She had poured herself into it. She had been devastated by personal tragedy just as the film reached the world. And she was recognized, but not rewarded. 2 years later, Taylor would win her first Oscar for a different film. But the work she did as Maggie the Cat remains, for many people, the finest performance of her long and extraordinary career. She gave the role her whole heart, and the world almost missed it. Number 2. The film and the American dream. At its deepest level, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is a story about the American dream, and what happens when that dream turns hollow. Big Daddy built his fortune from nothing. He worked hard his entire life. He owns 28,000 acres of the richest land in the Mississippi Delta. He has a family, a home, success. and yet none of it has made him happy. None of it has given him the one thing he wanted most, an honest relationship with his son. Brick was the golden boy, the athlete, the charmer, the man everyone loved. And now he is broken, drinking himself numb, unable to explain what has gone wrong inside him. Cooper did everything right, got the good grades, married well, had children, and has never felt truly loved by his family. Every character in this story has chased something they believed would make them complete, and none of them found it. Tennessee Williams was deeply critical of the American dream in all its shining, lying glory. He believed that the pursuit of success and appearance had cost America something essential: honesty, intimacy, real human connection. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is his fierce, burning argument for that belief, and it still feels relevant today. The dream looked beautiful from the outside. Inside, it was on fire. Number 1. The line that changed everything. Of all the words in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, there is one line that has stayed with audiences for more than 60 years. It is a line that Big Daddy says to Brick during their long, agonizing confrontation in the middle of the film. After Brick accuses the world of being full of mendacity, which means lies and dishonesty, Big Daddy turns the accusation back on him and asks him what he is running from. And then he says something like this: that life is too short and too precious to spend it in a fog of whiskey and self-pity, that a man has to face himself eventually, that there is no running from what is true inside you. The exact wording changes slightly between the play and the film, but the meaning is the same, and it lands like a thunderclap. In that moment, something shifts. Brick, who has been so closed off for the entire film, flinches. Just barely, just for a second. But it is enough. You can see it in Paul Newman's eyes, that tiny moment where the walls crack just a little and the light gets in. That is the heart of the whole story. That is what Tennessee Williams was writing toward. The truth will find you, no matter how far you run, no matter how much you drink, no matter how beautiful your lies are. The truth will always, eventually, find you. The whole movie was building to that one moment of cracked silence. Bonus fact: the scene that was almost cut and almost saved everything. There is a scene in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof that almost did not make it into the final film. It is the long conversation between Big Daddy and Brick, the one that takes up the middle section of the movie and runs for what feels like an eternity of held breath and painful honesty. During the editing process, there were conversations about trimming it significantly. Studio executives worried that audiences would grow restless. They worried that two men talking, just talking, no action, no spectacle, for that length of time would lose the audience's attention. Richard Brooks refused to cut it. He believed that the scene was the spine of the entire film. Without it, everything else fell apart. Without it, Brick was just a drunk with a broken ankle. Without it, Big Daddy was just a rich man dying of cancer. The scene was the place where the film said everything it had been building toward. It was the place where a father and a son finally faced each other with something approaching honesty. It was the place where the audience could feel the full weight of all the things that had never been said between these two men across an entire lifetime. Brooks fought for that scene in every editing meeting. He brought his argument backed by evidence from test screenings where audiences had not grown restless at all. They had leaned forward. They had held their breath. They had sat so still and so silent that you could hear the film projector humming in the background. He won the argument. The scene stayed in its full form. And it became the most talked about, most analyzed, most emotionally devastating sequence in the entire movie. Paul Newman and Burl Ives gave performances in that scene that film students still study today. Every pause was earned. Every sentence landed like a stone in water. The ripples are still spreading. The lesson from that scene, and from the fight to keep it, is simple and profound. Sometimes the bravest thing a storyteller can do is trust the silence, trust the stillness, trust that the truth, spoken honestly and without rush, is the most gripping thing in the world. The slowest scene became the one no one could forget. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is more than a movie. It is a mirror. It holds up a reflection of the parts of ourselves that we would rather not see, the lies we tell to stay comfortable, the silences we hide behind to avoid real pain, the love we withhold because we are afraid of what might happen if we offer it and it is refused. Tennessee Williams wrote this story because he believed that honesty, real, painful, devastating honesty, is an act of love. Not easy love, not comfortable love, but the kind of love that says, I see you, I know what you are hiding, and I am still here. Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor brought that story to life with a kind of courage and rawness that is rare in any era of filmmaking. Burl Ives made Big Daddy into a man you could love and fear at the same time. Richard Brooks made a film that proved that restraint and truth are more powerful than noise and spectacle. And 66 years after its release, the movie still burns. It still aches. It still asks the same hard questions it asked in 1958. Are you living honestly? Are you saying what you mean? Are you brave enough to face what is true inside you? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the most important ones. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we will keep uncovering them, one story at a time.